All right. Hello, everyone. I'm in London. Sunny, rainy, really nice evening, actually. I was in the airport a couple of weeks ago, about 10 days ago, and I was going on holiday, and I swore I wasn't going to buy a book because I thought I need to do some thinking, I need to figure some things out. So I just took a notepad with me, and I was just going to sit and write until I could figure everything in my head out. I did that, but I could not avoid, or I could not resist buying a book in the airport bookshop, and that was this one, Moral Ambition by Rutger Bregman, which I'd seen in hardback, and I thought that looks good. It's a very good book. I enjoyed it. It was a quick read, but it's got loads of interesting information in it, and it is actually a call to arms. It's a call to action because the world is currently in a bit of a mess. And actually, we now have the best quality of life that we've ever had as human beings. You know, the poorest people now in developed countries have a better quality of life than royalty a couple of hundred years ago. A couple of hundred years ago, you had the wealthiest man in the world was one of the Rothschilds who died of a common infection. The drugs to treat that infection, available to just about anybody now, in the developed world anyway, cost a couple of pounds or a few dollars. So the quality of life has moved on, but a lot more needs to be done. So this is not just another, quixotic, idealistic, if only, we need to do this, we need to do that. It actually provides a bit of a plan, which is really, really nice. In fact, on the back of the book, I'll just read you what it says. One of the greatest thinkers of the 21st century, George Monbiot. That was part of my decision to buy it. I thought, well, if he likes it, I really like George Monbiot. A fierce and brilliant call to arms for anyone who has been wondering whether there's more to life. In brackets, there is. That's by Tim Harford. I think he's the guy who wrote The Undercover Economist. And then A Fresh and Practical Guide to Idealism by Steven Pinker. Essential, read it, then go out and change the world. Now that's quite fun, isn't it? Hannah Ritchie, clear, brave, important and provocative. The rare read that might actually help you become a better person. Adam Grant. I imagine when I first picked this up, however many weeks ago, and didn't buy it because it's still in hardback and I had so many other books on the go, I thought, that sounds good. Become a better person. A disruptive revolutionary armed with an actual tangible plan at last. That's by Jamila Jamil. A stark wake-up call urging us to truly utilize our talents to create the future we all wish to live in. That's a good summary of the book. That's by Trevor Noah. There's two more to go. Challenges readers to use their lives to improve the world by Cal Newport, and then by Johan Hari, a life-changing book. So what's it about? Oh my God, that's a question, isn't it? It's essentially an education in how much change people can affect on the world, how much positive change, and how important it is now to affect important change, because the world's facing a couple of existential crises. You've got climate change, you've got AI, and you've got biological, not just war, but pandemics. COVID killed 20 million people. In the last century before it was eradicated, smallpox killed 500 million people. In 1918, the Spanish flu, which is a racist name, I know, it didn't actually start in Spain, but they were the first people to write about it openly in their newspapers, so it got called the Spanish flu, killed more people than the whole of the First World War. COVID was actually very mild compared to these, but it could have been a hell of a lot worse. So one of the there's a few central characters in this book that just show how much outsized impact, positive impact, one person can have. But let's look at the epoch we're living in at the moment. Up until 1750, the world population, GDP, if it was ever measured, if you want to call it that, and everything was kind of flatlining for millennia. What happened in 1750, Industrial Revolution, and since then our productivity, our population growth, the amount of food we eat, the amount of, everything's gone just completely taken off. So it's not just having a heavily oversized important opinion of ourselves to say we're probably living in the time in human history where our actions have the greatest impact on the future. And for a long time, the world's religions and cults or whatever have been going about, oh, we're in end times, we're in end times. But what if we're not? You know, because that's been going for centuries and the world hasn't ended yet. And sure, it seems like it might do, and there are certainly some risks, but there are also things we can do to maybe continue the existence of the human species. Wouldn't that be nice? Um, the world's overcrowded, and climate change is a bit scary, and trying to change that all by yourself is going to be difficult, right? Very difficult. But one of the things about moral ambition is at the end, it's actually got 7 core tenets of the school of moral ambition. What if you can find something to fix that will have a massive impact and isn't that difficult to fix? So one of the examples in here that stands out to me is air pollution. Air pollution kills 10 million people a year. That's more than fires, heat, wars, traffic accidents. It's one of the biggest individual killers every year, and it contributes to things like cancer, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. So imagine if you could affect that. But how the hell do you affect something like that? Well, there's a few case studies in here. One of them is of something called Radical Nerds, which was started by a law student in one of the Princeton or Yale, one of the Ivy League American unis, who thought, I don't want to be a lawyer. It's a bit boring, and what good does it do? You essentially help criminals get off, and you help rich people avoid tax. That's what all the top lawyers were doing, and probably what they all still do. Top lawyers in terms of the ones who make the most money. So this guy set up a Society of Radical Nerds where he basically wrote letters, loads and loads of letters. And can you imagine a group of lawyers actually writing letters to do? I mean, now you have people like Lawyers for Israel, who basically, ban anything that might make people remember there's a country in existence and a people of Palestine. Banning, watermelon badges in hospitals, cancelling kite making and cake selling events because they might be anti-Semitic or be terrorist breeding. Oh, it's bullshit. Can you imagine lawyers actually doing good? Well, these guys did. I mean, one of the things they did was manage to get seatbelts made a legal requirement in cars. That saved hundreds of thousands of lives, and they did a lot more as well. What if there were rules? Because human beings spend 90% of their time inside, and viruses are more, they're easier to catch inside than outside. So should there be laws about the quality of air inside buildings? Because remember, air pollution, bad air, killing 10 million people a year. What if that happened? There's actually already technology that can do it. Right now, it's in the kind of stage that solar panels or solar energy was in the 90s. Super expensive, seemed like a crazy idea. Everybody attached to an oil company or anything said, oh, it's crazy, it's stupid, it will never work. Well, now, solar energy is the cheapest form of energy in history, in human history. Yeah. So why wasn't it faster? Why didn't it come about sooner? Basically because the way it's summed up in here, well, the oil companies don't own the sun, so they don't want to make any money out of solar energy, so they'll do everything they can to delay it, right? Climate change, that's also contributing towards bad air quality. Now, I've rattled on a bit about that, so let's give some examples of how this stuff can be changed, yeah? So you had the Radical Nerds. Then you have a guy who was very successful, top of his class, privately educated, went to Cambridge, brilliant at all the sports and everything, made tons of money, was in his 40s, sitting on his couch in London, looking for a new job. And then he watched a documentary about some girl whose mother left a cigarette in her room, and the girl got 90% burns, lost her foot. And she was a baby when this happened. The mother left, and it broke his heart. He started crying. So he organized a charity swim. So many people, like, I don't know, 500,000 people signed up. Maybe it was 100,000, but it was a huge number, more than he expected. And they raised money for the girl, enough to see her through the whole of her life. And then somebody said, what are we swimming for next year? So then he started thinking, wow, what can I do to actually have an impact here? So then he started working on malaria. Malaria was a massive killer. And he set about, how do we fix it? For finding these things out, insect repellent treated malaria nets. Mosquito nets, sorry. And he saved over 100,000 lives. And he set up one of the most effective charities going, in terms of the impact they have. And then historically, you have people like the Quakers. The Quakers have had a massive impact. I mean, if it wasn't for the Quakers, we might still have slavery. Now, lots of really good examples like this. Or here's some statistics for you. So we humans breed and kill 80 billion animals, pigs, sheep, cows, whatever, every year to feed ourselves. Broiler chickens grow so fast, right, because of everything they're pumped full of to provide cheap chicken meat for us, that some ecologists have actually said Earth records of the soil from our time in the future, may be defined by the number of broiler bones in them. Wow, right? But listen to this. Since 2021, I think, so 4 and a bit years ago, laboratories have been able to produce meat. Laboratories, no animals involved, just from cells, produce beef, produce chicken. So maybe a time will come when we don't need a quarter of the Earth's inhabitable land for bloody dairy farming. Yeah? And the amount of farts these cows do is actually one of the biggest. As an industry, it's one of the biggest contributors to climate, to global warming. Right? So there was, and this is reframing for people who want to make a change, there was a animal rights activist, really smart girl, Leah, maybe Gomez or Garcia or Garces, but it's in the book anyway. Read the book; it's a really good book. You might have been able to figure from me, babbling on. And she decided to get to know some chicken farmers. And then she realized that, hang on, their life is crap as well. They get pulled in by this big chicken farming company, the biggest in the States, I think it's called Purdue or something. They get told they'll make loads of money. Usually they get pulled into these contracts. They've got giant, dark warehouses, sheds full of stinking dead chickens. And accountants at the company are real smart, so they're never making any money. The only way to get out is to sell the land, which has often been in their family for generations. They don't want to do it. So she started looking at things from their perspective, and this actually led to a change. The guy in charge of Purdue, Jim Purdue, I hope I'm not mispronouncing that, got in touch with her and said, look, I want to change this. This is bad. What? The villain gets in touch with her and says, I want to change this. So things can happen. Then you had the Quakers. You've got a guy, Thomas Clarkson, who was at Cambridge and decided to enter the Cambridge Latin essay competition. And so he picked slavery as his topic. And he basically just, went on a crash course studying slavery. Essentially just translated into Latin a book by another Quaker about slavery. But it won him a prize. He became famous. And he just couldn't believe how awful slavery was. So he walked around for ages. Is it true? Is it true? Is it true? And it overwhelmed him how terrible it was. And then he had a breakdown, and he decided one day, sitting on a road, that, no, he didn't have a breakdown, he had an epiphany, that he was going to dedicate his life to the anti-slavery movement, the abolitionists, abolishing slavery. And he succeeded, but only when he was about 80. At the end of the book, it says, have you done enough? Because when he was 80 and he gave the speech to, in England somewhere, that in Bristol maybe, I don't know. No, it was in London, that 5,000 people from all over the world attended. As soon as it was finished, it was squabbling. And it was, what role should women have in abolishing slavery? So there's always another fight. One of the other things in here which is useful, I think, is how do you get people to do something? Because there have been studies on people who hid Jews from the Nazis in the Second World War. And it's looked at their background, it's looked at how many houses they had, how many rooms they had in their houses or on their farms, what their education was it something to do with their income level? Are richer people more likely to, hide people fleeing persecution? There's none of these things matter. Rich people, poor people, people with big houses, people with small houses, people of all kinds of means, people of all kinds of religions. It makes no difference. The thing that made a difference was, have they been asked? So there was a guy, Alfred Does, who drove through the Netherlands with Jews. And one town became famous for hiding more Jews than anybody else, because he'd basically just go around with them, knock on the doors. And this guy was a drifter until he was in his 30s or 40s, and say, will you take this family in? Oh, no, we can't. Well, your neighbours did already. Anyway, they're here. Good luck. That's the thing that makes a difference. Asking. And that chapter is called Lower Your Action Threshold. I think there are people who do without asking. Everybody else has to be asked, and that's the thing that makes the most difference. So if you want to affect a change, and to start this chapter on another chapter titled Start a Cult, go around and ask people to do it. Go ask people to join you. Be a pain in the ass to affect good. And there's actually a school in London that trains people to start non-profits or organizations that change the world. I mean, I think it's a fantastic book. I like to make these reviews not too long, so I'm going to shut up now. I'm going to try to, but there's still so much more I want to say. There really is. It's a really, really good book. Make a stand, decide what you want to do, and if you want to affect change, get people involved. Ask them. That's what you got to do. And you can actually affect a massive change. When people are resistant to change, this is something in the book as well, they start saying things like, oh, it's natural, oh, it's always been like this, oh, it can't be changed. That's bullshit. And that's something that needs to be challenged. So figure out what you want to change. Ask people to do it. Make winning a moral duty. That's one of the chapter titles as well. My God, the more I talk about this book, the more I like it. I'm giving it 10 out of 10. I didn't even think I'd buy a book, but I did. It's not the kind of book I usually read, but I've really, really enjoyed it. It's fantastic. It's really good. One of the quotes in here, which I read in another book, I think it was actually in the George Monbiot book I reviewed recently, The Invisible Doctrine, sorry. And there's a great quote in there. And this will lead me on to the last point about the book, I promise. There's a great quote in there. And it was, if wealth was the inevitable consequence of enterprise and hard work, every woman in Africa would be a millionaire. Okay? So that's mentioned in the end of the book when he says, people from the left often don't take responsibility themselves. They say, oh, we have to change the system, we have to do this, we have to do that. And people on the right often say that it's all about personal responsibility. If you just work hard, if you pull yourself up by your bootstraps, both are bullshit. It's a balance. Nelson Mandela says, changing yourself is harder than changing society. So, it's not just about individuality, because you got to get people to help you. You got to bring people on board. You got to reframing. Did I mention reframing? So the woman who took on the chicken farming industry, and when people think farm, there's not bucolic and all the bullshit images they show you. It's animals who can't breathe, who can't see light, who grow so fast that their organs burst, shoved into cages and everything. I'm not vegetarian, but I do eat a lot less meat now, partly due to reading things like this. And if we can reduce the amount of land taken up for farming, for this kind of intensive factory farming, then we reduced global warming. You don't read about all the floods in Pakistan and Bangladesh and every other country that isn't one of the Western Northern countries. And those countries are all suffering because of the actions of the West. The global South got robbed for centuries, and now they're taking all the shit, which is a result of heavy burning of fossil fuels and everything else. Yeah. My God, I got that off my chest. This is a great book. Listen, really good book. Moral Ambition. Stop Wasting Your Talent and Start Making a Difference by Rutger Bregman. The book's, I said I was going to stop. There's too much good stuff in it. The book starts off with, there was like some big thing in the news about a brain scan of somebody, and it was a monk, and he's only parts of his brain that were lit up were the ones that show happiness, happy brainwaves, and the parts of the brain that store negativity and anger. There was nothing there, and people say, oh, we found the happiest man on earth, the loveliest brainwaves on earth, and everything, and how can we be like him? This guy spent 30 years just meditating, doing nothing. What a waste. I'm trying not to swear. What an absolute waste of life. Seriously. Do you want to be happy and sit there doing nothing? Or do you want to make a mark? Do you want to live your life to the full and maybe change the world in the process for the better? Yeah, they actually interviewed the guy, and in his 50s he started I can't remember what he started, but all the money he made from his talks goes to this charity, to this foundation, because he regretted not being more engaged and actually not being able to make a difference. Well, for those 30 years anyway. But there you go. Zip. I'm going to shut up. I hope that wasn't too long. I hope you enjoyed it. That's Moral Ambition, the internationally best-selling author of Humankind and Utopia for Realists. I got to read those two. Rutger Bregman. Thanks for watching.